Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you so much.
I'm glad to hear it. Please tell us your name.
My name is Donna Buchanan, and I am the president and owner of Crucial Shift Consulting, a change management company that specializes in transformation and change in higher education.
Excellent, excellent. Very, very nice to meet you and excellent. Can't wait to hear more about your company. Now, will you share a little bit about yourself? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Oh my gosh, yeah, along those lines of education, I kind of got into this work that I do because I personally understand the impact of education on the trajectory of people's lives. It certainly changed the trajectory of my life, and lives and families and communities forever. And I'm always interested in ensuring that people have access to education in order to do that. So that's really what kind of drives me.
Absolutely. So, tell me a little bit about your education. Where did you go to school, and what were some of your academic experiences?
I actually went to high school here in Los Angeles, at Crenshaw High School. I was born and raised in South Central Los Angeles. I then attended Loyola Marymount University here in Los Angeles. And then I obtained my master's degree from a small Quaker founded social justice institution called Pacific Oaks. I did my work in Seattle, Washington, but the main campus is here in Pasadena, California. And then I earned my doctorate degree in higher education administration from the University of Southern California.
Oh, okay. So we have the at least same doctorate. But before we get deep into education, tell me what is like. So we all hear the stories about what South Central Los Angeles is like. We were shared the experience with Dr. Dre and some of the rappers that came out at the time, and there are lots of stories on the news about gang banging and drugs and things like that. From your experience, what was that area like when you were growing up, and do you still live there?
No, I don't live there, but I was born and raised in LA. I live in Inglewood, California now, but I've moved to Washington State, small little quaint fishing village called Gig Harbor. So I've kind of experienced maybe the opposite of South Central Los Angeles as well. And I'd be happy to share a little bit about that experience in a moment. But growing up in South Central LA um, was great in many ways. We had a neighborhood. All the kids in the neighborhood would play together, and all the families knew each other and supported each other. Um, uh, at that time, the gangs were just starting, and so they were around. And it was a little bit of a challenge in school. I'll give you one example. Um, I was pretty studious and kind of a loner. I don't know if I'd say loner, but I put it this way: I wasn't in with the in crowd. And I remember one day, and I never had a fight in my life. Matter of fact, I never even watched the fights because they were always ugly. I would just keep walking. Um, but one day I got a word that the gang person, girl at our school was going to beat me up after school. Like, what? I don't know her. I don't know why. But apparently, I had engaged in a conversation, some brief conversation with a guy who was her boyfriend.
Wow.
And I had never been so afraid in my life that I was going to get beat up. Um, but I knew two things. As afraid as I was, somehow or another, I knew two things. I just couldn't get beat up. Like I just couldn't get beat up, and I couldn't run because I knew if I ran, I'd be running forever. You know, And so when the time came, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a posse. I didn't have friends who were going to come and stand behind me. And as the school bell rang, I saw her coming. I'd never seen her before, but I knew it was her because she had this gang of girls behind her and she was yelling, and I had no idea. I couldn't focus on what she was saying, but I knew that had to be her, and she was coming for me. And I still didn't know what to do. My knees were shaking. I was sweating. But as she arrived, I continued to look her in the eye. And she came nose to nose with me. And so I looked at her. I nodded slightly, you know, in respect or deference. I don't know. And then I slowly turned around and walked away.
Mhm.
I don't know what made me do that. You know, Les Brown would say, motivational speaker Les Brown would say, you know, nothing like a made up mind. And my pastor would say divine intervention. But either way, I learned a really important lesson that day that has stayed with me throughout my life. And that is, people are people. She felt like she had been disrespected. And so she had to do whatever she had to do to reclaim her respect. And by me showing up and by me, you know, giving her that nod, I think allowed her to do that. And then I just couldn't give any energy into an alternative of getting beat up, and somehow or another, we worked that out without any words, because I never said one word. But we worked that out. And I say that to say, there are a lot of challenging things and bad things that happened in South Central LA. But there were a lot of interesting lessons. There were a lot of good things that gang people did back in the day when they started back there in our neighborhood. Even the worst, you know, gangbangers protected the older people. You know, they wouldn't curse in front of the, you know, adults. And so it was a good place to grow up because there were a lot of lessons that I was able to learn about life that have served me very well. That you have to show up. You just have to know that there are options and that people are people. And if you can reach them, you can resolve issues. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's go back to education. So I think we both agree about this, that education is a game changer. I think the interesting piece about education, specifically for marginalized people, the early history of education was unfair or unuseful. It wasn't a very good thing. You know, we had separate but equal. And if you were lucky enough to have the separate and you were in a Black community where there were Black teachers and Black principals and Black this and Black that, there was a good chance you would get a good education. We saw a lot of great Black people come out of that period post Reconstruction. And then we made our way to where we are now with integration. And for poor communities, education is more of a hazard than it is a help. Because, you know, if you're not sitting in your chair upright, if you aren't paying attention, if you don't understand something, you may miss. And education assumes everybody learns the same, which I think is a horrible, horrible assumption, because that's not the case. I think the way that education sees boys and girls is inaccurate. And then you get to the next level of education, you're in higher education. And I read something a few years ago when I was writing my dissertation, that more than 60% of students who go into college are not prepared for the rigor of college. because it's either they were AP or AB or whatever, IB, whatever kind of students they were in high school. College is a whole nother thing. And I don't care what college you go to, whether you go to a college that's just, giving degrees for basket weaving, or you're going to research colleges. The curriculum is a bit more than you would expect coming from high school. A lot of kids end up in college with imposter syndrome, right? I don't know if I belong here because I was really so smart back then, but now I'm here. Am I really smart? So I think that education has a lot of work to do. But I think more importantly, something that I have seen. So I went to, I had 2 undergraduate degrees, 1 master's degree, and 1 doctorate degree. My first 3 degrees were from historically Black colleges. Probably the best experiences of my life. Absolutely the best experience. They knew my name. I was not a 9-digit number. They knew my name. They knew my family. They knew when I was struggling. And it wasn't like I could come to their office hours. They would come to me and say, Rochelle, this is a poor report you produced here. You need to redo this. You need to rethink it. They were like another level of family. I think that when you go to more predominantly white or more open colleges and these online colleges and all these things, you're still stuck in that place. What Black colleges typically give you is a sense of belonging, and that you aren't feeling like you're alone in a space trying to find your way, especially if you've come away from a small community or something, and you're coming to someone completely new. That generic feeling that you get when college is sometimes discombobulating, which sometimes contributes to people not completing or changing or leaving or dropping out or whatever. But nonetheless, I think that education is an important factor. The question just is, in my mind, is how do we change education to meet people where they are?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's 5 hours in a dissertation. But I do want to speak to a couple of things that you said. I have not attended a historically Black institution, and neither have my children, my 3 children. And so I have nieces who have, and had very excellent experiences. And so I hear the same theme over and over again, that it is a place that understands who I am and educates and cares about the whole person. And so I can definitely respect that. Um, and I'm a little careful here because it's challenging. My high school at the time that I was there was predominantly Black. And it was a great experience. The principal was absolutely amazing. He went on, Sid Thompson went on to become the superintendent, first Black superintendent of the LA Unified School District, and so on. And so there were African-American teachers who did the same thing. And there were 1 or 2 white teachers there who also did the same thing for me, in terms of seeing who I am, recognizing my intellect and pushing me to do better, and providing opportunities for me to do better. And that was interesting. At the same time, I remember this one great white teacher who I had, she was just right there with us. And we were the best of the best in her class. And I wrote a paper once, and she thought I had plagiarized it. And that really hurt me, because I thought that if you think I'm so smart, and I'm so smart, why wouldn't you believe that I wrote this? It's like, okay, so maybe you don't. And at the same time, there were counselors who were Black counselors who, I was a student body vice president. I was in all the honor societies. I did outside activities. And she was like, well, maybe you should apply to XYZ school and community college. And I didn't even know that Stanford, I didn't know that Harvard or they were just on the moon for as far as I knew. I mean, vaguely I'd heard those terms, but I never associated them with me. And so I'm always careful to say whether it's a Black person or a white person, because I've had both support me and I've had both disappoint me. When I went to Loyola, and the expectations that people raised about how smart white kids were, like that's all we heard in high school is, you know, you can't compete, or you have to be able to compete with these kids who are, you know, live in the other towns, and, you know, you have to do this and you have to do that. And, you know, they have this opportunity, that opportunity. And then when I got to college, a lot of those students were surprised that I was smart. And I was surprised that they weren't as smart as everybody made them out to be. You know, we were equally smart. And so that was a whole other dynamic. But I can say that I do understand what you were saying about that sense of community and familiarity and people supporting you, because ours was the first class of, you know, a big cohort of African-American students, many of whom came from my high school. We came together. But it was still lonely in a lot of the classes and around campuses, but there were African-American people at that institution who made it their business to help us feel like we belonged and that this was a place that supported us. So no matter what else was going on, to still have that sense of connection and community was incredibly important, and was able to receive that there. So I you know, I get it. I do get it. At the same time, there were some white professors whom I still remember who did the same thing. So I think there's hope. I think part of the challenge that I'm seeing right now in the work that I do, because I work in change management. So whatever the project is or the idea is, how do we incorporate it into what we're doing in a way that's going to be successful? And so one of the challenges that I'm having with the whole social justice, anti-Black racism conversation about change in higher education is that I think we're getting stuck. I think we're getting stuck on focusing on trying to identify, you know, trying to identify who racists are. Like, you know, you're a racist. We come from, you know, America is racist, and, you know, we want you to admit that you're racist. And those are conversations that certainly need to happen and are happening. But I think the way that you do it out in society as a member of a community is different from how you do it as a leader or a stakeholder in an institution who's interested in creating sustainable change for that institution. And so I think we're starting with one of the answers, diversity training or town hall meetings, but we're not starting with the right questions. And the right questions are, for example, you know, a lot of this energy started around a year ago, around the George Floyd murder. But what hasn't happened in individual institutions is they haven't made a connection between what does the murder of a Black man in Minnesota last year by police officers have to do with racism in our institution, and how does that impact our students? So I don't think that the stakeholders in general in the institutions really get that connection because we haven't made it. The other thing is it's going to be different for each of the colleges. Every institution has a different relationship to discrimination or racism. They have a different culture. They have a different tradition. They have a different level of resources. They have a different kind of leadership. They have different organizational structures and decision-making processes. You've got private institutions and public institutions. What are the responsibilities of a public institution, for example? And so we're moving to solutions when we haven't even asked, all of the right questions. And so the bottom line for me is we have to start with, what does racism look like at our institution? What are we going to do about it? And what are the obstacles at our institution that prevent us from doing that? And then we can figure out what are the solutions, which will inevitably include town hall meetings and diversity training and all of those other things that are happening. But it is much broader than that. Those questions allow us to look at it, the issue, systemically and systematically. Because even if you fix the people, you're not fixing the system, the policies and the procedures, the whole organizational infrastructure that supports the problem. And so that's what I'm about right now, is just trying to get people to stop and back up and start with the right questions, engage the right people, and proceed in a methodic way. That is so challenging because of the sense of urgency. And I understand the sense of urgency. You've got to ride on the urgency. But if you don't do it in a way that's sustainable, you're going to spend a lot of what has happened in the past is you spend a lot of energy, you spend a lot of time, and you create this illusion of change, but nothing has changed. And that which has changed isn't sustainable because we didn't do it methodically from the very beginning.
I think I agree with part of that, but I think the problem is, and I tell people this all the time, it is very easy to put what we call neoclassic experiences and reasoning to a problem. But when you pull back all of that fancy decoration, it's simply people's decisions, intentions, and actions. Racism is not accidental. Discrimination is not accidental. What children experience in school, and children from 0 to 100, it is intentional. So the woman that wrote the book about 20 years ago, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in
the Cafeteria? Yeah.
She was dead.
Beverly Tatum.
Yeah, she was dead on it, because exactly the case. So working at Duke and Duke Law, I was so taken aback by, here you have these children who are absolutely stars at their universities, coming from University of Georgia or Harvard or Yale, or wherever they're coming from at the top of their class. And here they come to Duke University, which is considered the Harvard of the South. And they're sitting together in these small little clusters where you see whole bunches of other kids, white kids and girls and all sitting in their space, and they're always talking together. They're always doing something. And yet still here we are not included in the conversation. So there was an event held at the law school, and it was like, why do we need affinity groups? Was the name of the topic. And a white guy stood up there and he said, I think we need affinity groups because the Black kids don't know how to do stuff for themselves. And so it's one of those things where you scratch your head and you think, well, okay. Then you hear from other students talking about they don't know, they're not smart enough to be here. And you get these things that are just constantly out there. And at the end of the day, what we have in these school systems, in regards to what it is, in my experiences was a historically Black college. So there were white professors there, there were brown professors, there were Black professors there. They all seem to sing out of the same handbook. They all seem to genuinely care. So if I had a problem with financial aid, or if I had a problem with scheduling, whatever it is, it wasn't like I had to go find someone in that department and say, hey, this is what happened to me. I can tell my professor or my departmental chair, hey, and he or she would get on the phone and call whoever it is. I'm sending Rochelle over to your office. Okay, she's going to come talk to you about such and such and such. And the way that the schools are built and the way education is built, the racism that is embedded in the same way it is in every other part of society. So when you go to school, wherever you are in the academic structure, the racism you experience, you're going to experience that exact same racism when you go to work for that company, or when you go to hang out with those kids, right? Or whatever it is, that racism shows up. And if you listen to any of my chats, it's replete with students in education talking about their negative experiences in going to colleges where they've been accepted, told that they were glad they were there, but then the minute they get there, they go to their 9-digit number into their corner, stay over there and be on your best behavior. So when you have a university that can have a noose on the campus where Black and brown kids are going to see there, and if there's nothing to be done about it other than to say, we're going to investigate it, and whoever it is, if they decide to come forth and say this student did it, there may be some repercussions, but you'll never know about it. The thing about education that really needs to change is we need to be intentional about welcoming students onto our campus. So if we are serious that we're bringing Black and brown kids onto our campus, we need to understand who they are before they get there, and then we need to make sure the resources are there once they're there.
I totally hear what you're saying, and I totally understand what you're saying, and I agree. I think though, however, what is different right now is an unparalleled opportunity to do those things, in my mind. In my mind, what I am seeing is a critical mass of people of all races who are saying, we get it. Okay, in a way that we had not gotten it before. Like, okay, our eyes are open in a way they've never been before. The challenge to me is that because African Americans have been saying this for centuries, we've been saying it for centuries, now by the time people are just opening an eye, we're done. We're like, you know what? You need to be doing this, and this, and this. And because we have no more time, we're done. We have no more patience. We don't want to tell you. We've been saying it. You just need to figure it out. You need to do it, because we're not going to tolerate this behavior anymore. And that is true. That is, in my opinion, where we're at. The challenge is we're expecting people to do more than they're capable of doing because they don't know. And they're just, it's like you've lived something your whole life and somebody else hasn't. They haven't seen it. And now they're getting a little glimpse of it. Well, they have to figure out what to do with that, and they have to be able to grow with that. At the same time, we have this sense of urgency because we know that if it doesn't get done now, the chances are it probably won't get done.
That's right. I agree with
you know, this is it. And I have so much anxiety around the fact that every single day, we are squandering an opportunity to move further. And, but I still think, Rochelle, with everything in me, it has to be from a place of starting with bringing people together, understanding where they're at, and being able to leverage the folks who are further along, because there have been a lot of white folks, a lot of other people of color who have been on this bandwagon with us.
right.
And I think we have to leave no ally behind, is what I say. And so instead of making really broad statements, I think we have to engage the people who are there. And we need to figure out in each institution what change looks like for that institution. So, Dr. Rochelle, in one place, it might be exactly what you just said, identifying what each population of students need to feel welcomed and valued as intellectual, important members of this academic community. In some others, it's going to be, how come we don't have any African-American students to begin with? So what is it about our recruitment process that is a problem? Why is it that we have students who are here and feel welcomed and part of the community, but they're not graduating? So again, to me, it goes back to not really looking at one solution, but asking the question, what is it about the culture? What is it about the systems? What is it about the people in our institution that is inhibiting this problem from being solved? And do we really want to solve it? Exactly. Let's be really clear.
Right.
You know, so there are a lot of institutions who don't really want to solve the problem. And I think when you start asking that question, you'll be able to glean whether or not they really want to solve the problem. But for those who do, you'll be able to figure out how to solve the problem. And the other part of it is that there's so much going on in these institutions, we cannot forget. People, I don't think that the community at large, we're at this crossroad. We're at this crossroad, but I don't think that at the end of the day, people are going to continue to accept the status quo. Things have to change. And so an institution is going to have to ask itself, are we going to commit to some change? Are we going to stand for the status quo? Because at the end of the day, there will be a reckoning. And my fear is if we just keep going to solutions like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that, they are going to do that. That's what we ask for. That's what they're going to do, but it isn't going to change. It isn't going to change the institution, but it will allow them to say, that's what you asked for. That's what we did. So that is the challenge for me of moving too quickly towards some solution that might not even solve the issue in that particular institution. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I am in no hurry to move to anything. What I am in a hurry for is for people to go on the record and admit where they're coming from. So if you are intentionally denying people something, or allowing people to do a behavior, or allowing something to just say, okay, that's what we're doing. Because I think when you hide around all these veils and these cloaks and daggers of who we are and what we aren't, is what's got us to where we are now. We are a society of people who hold biases based on information we don't know as a complete fact. I remember when I was very, very young, I remember a white man asking a grown black man, did he have a tail? You know, and it's like, what? A tail? Like, you know, he said he read somewhere that black people have a tail that's hanging off their butts. But these thoughts, like with the death of Mr. Floyd, you know, I can't tell you how many white people have come to me and said, I had no idea this was going on. My question always is where have you been? What?
Okay, so see, so that's where we, you know, for me, that's a question I would have in my mind. And I might ask that if I am out, you know, in the community. But as a person in an institution or working with an institution to create change, I would find that approach to be counterproductive. Because if now you come to me and you say, oh, okay, I get it, then what I want to do next is say, okay, great. Now, how can we move from here? I don't want to visit why they didn't get it before. I want to move from what can we do right now to get you to the next step to help us make some progress at this institution. And my fear is that, first of all, nobody, you're never going to have 100%, 90%. And in this day and age, you might not even have 70% of everybody agree that there is such a thing called racism in America, historically, today, and that they participate in it. And so my point is knowing that, and that's going to be the case for any kind of change that you're trying to make. It just happens to be that this issue is probably the most challenging one that we have in the history of this country. And so it's going to be even more difficult to do that. But my point is, with any kind of change that you are trying to make to a status quo, there are going to be people who have an invested interest in maintaining the status quo. And there are going to be people who have an invested interest in the change. And so my goal always is to figure out how to create a critical mass of the right people to create the change. Because if you stay focused on all of those people who are never going to admit it, never going to change, time is clicking, and they will keep you engaged in that effort, and you will be wasting every resource, every, you know, moment, every prospect of change that you have. And so I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on those people who, I mean, look at the marches. Look at those marches. You've never seen in your lifetime so many people who are willing to come out and say, this is not okay, this is not right. In these institutions, I am finding that Oh gosh, about 6 months into the social change unrest, I wanted to find out, what is it that social justice workers want, agents want? What do you want? Okay, we've got everybody at the table, we have their attention, people are saying, yes, we get it, we see it.
Right.
What do you want? I want to understand, what do you want? I brought together students. What do you want? People, administrators at the higher ed institutions, faculty members. What do you want? And so I think that's where I want to be, is figuring out, what are we asking for? What do we want? And then let's create this plan to get it. But if we stay engaged with trying to convince those who are never going to be convinced, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get very far. I said all that to say also is that there have been a number of white faculty members, for example, who have spoken up for social justice and anti-Black racism change in their institutions. And they have received death threats. Their jobs have been, some of them have lost their jobs. I couldn't get a white man to come to get their perspective, because either the ones who are feeling like, you know what, I don't care what you say or what you do, you don't belong here, you ain't ever gonna belong in this institute, we're not gonna give it up. Or those who want to change and don't know how, and are being told, go away and figure it out. Those who are just being told you're a racist, admit it. And those who are a little bit more conscious and want to help, and then they're being pushed down by their folks who don't want them, their faces. They don't want other white faces standing up for the cause. So I think we really have to take into consideration the entire context of what is preventing us from having greater success in moving from this point that we're at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done in this space, and I think it's going to take us time to figure it all out, but there is a lot of work to be done. I'm very grateful for you taking the time out to talk with me today. We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to leave the remaining time for you to say anything you want to say that we did not cover.
I think I'm so grateful for this opportunity, Dr. Rochelle, and for the work that you are doing, because it's really important work. It's always important to hear perspectives, because that's really how we'll get the solutions. Everybody around the room has a perspective, and if we can just understand it, we don't have to agree, we don't have to like it. But if we understand it through these kinds of dialogues, we leave ourselves open to the possibility of creating better, more sustainable answers and solutions. And I really think that this is where the progress is. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the work that you are doing.
Thank you so much for joining me. As soon as this video converts, I'll send you a link. Please review it and let me know if I may upload it. And please come back and talk to us again soon. We'd love to hear more of your thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you so kindly. Take good care.
You too. Bye.